Hi everyone, welcome to lesson 16 of Ignite Your Music Career. That track you heard, Repercussions, has been on a few different TV shows. It's been in a bunch of video games, and just a simple little track that's just a kind of an underscore, might be a little tense. Sometimes it's an action kind of thing it can be used in. Anyway, it still pays royalties, which is great, and it's still getting placed in different shows. So this week we're going to talk about step agreements, or step licensing agreements. We're going to talk about what they're used for, who uses them, what you should look out for in them. You won't see a lot of them sometimes in the television world, but in the film world and game world you probably will a lot. Download the free sample pack and enjoy and use in your music. And let's go, let's talk about step licensing agreements. Okay, step licensing agreements. They're just that, steps. What they are situations where someone comes to you to compose music for a film or a game, and they pay you so much money up front to do that, but then you get more money on the back side if certain steps are reached. So for example, an indie filmmaker wants to use your song in their film for a festival use, or they're just going to put it out there. If that film gains more money or exposure through the different steps, the composer or the author of that song will get paid more money. So you might, for an example, license your pop song or indie rock song to a filmmaker. In the agreement they pay you, $500 to license that upfront fee. But also you negotiate what's called a step agreement or step license. So if that film makes $25,000 as an indie film, you might receive another $500. If it makes $100,000, it might receive another $1,000. If it makes $250,000, you might receive another $5,000. So these are steps or milestones that this product film reaches. You get paid accordingly. So you still get your royalties and things like that, but you also get more or additional payments on top of that. So for another example, say for example a video game. So you do a score for a video game, or they use your song in a video game. If that video game company pays you, $5,000 up front to use your song, that's great. But they also might have agreements in place in the step side of things, where if that video game sells 1 million units, you get an additional $10,000. If it sells 2 million units, you might get another additional $10,000. If it sells 3 million units, it might be another $10,000. So that's what the steps are all about. Typically they're used in situations by film directors or indie film directors, or game companies, indie game companies a lot, when they don't have a huge budget for music, but they want to get your song in their game or in their film, they think it's perfect. So what they're kind of doing is mitigating risk a little bit on both sides when you think about it. The artist is giving their music for a little less, if it's $500 for example for a game or a film, but they're thinking the product is good enough that it's actually going to make them more money in the long run. So everybody wants to get their music in TV shows and games and films. That's what Ignite is all about. So sometimes you're going to run across these kind of deals where they're going to say, well, we'll pay you $1,000 up front, but we feel so strongly in our film and our marketing and our budgeting that we have, that every time we reach a certain level or milestone or step, we are going to give money back to you. So that's kind of how it works. It's not just a straight, here's some money for your tune, you're going to get money on the back end, which you will anyway, but it's more of, we haven't got a lot of money right now up front, but we're willing to give you this if you're willing to accept a step agreement or a milestone agreement, whatever you want to call it. So that once our indie film that has a budget of $1 million makes $1 million at the box office, we're going to give you X number of dollars. If it makes 2 million, we're going to give you some more money or another step, 3 million, etc. So that's kind of how they work. It's kind of a situation where if you're a composer or a singer-songwriter, one of the things you want to look at or gauge is the company itself. So is this game company, for example, that's going to use your music in their product or in their game, are they reputable, obviously? Do they have the marketing push behind them? Are they going to go forward and actually, push this thing so much so I can make money? So So there's not a lot of risk on both sides if you think about it, because if you feel strongly enough to be working with them and they feel strong enough to be working with you, it's kind of your decision and their decision, and you kind of take the risk accordingly, each other, I guess, when you think about it. So that's kind of what a step agreement is all about. It's basically incremental steps, just like walking up the stairs. You get to that first step, it's X number of dollars more given to you. Second step, third step, fourth step, etc. And again, it's mostly in games. You'll see it in maybe streams of games too, and also movies of all kinds. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. You're not going to see that a lot, but it's a really good negotiating thing to have in your back pocket too. Because a lot of these companies do not understand what step licensing is. So if you really want to have your song in that show or film or game, we'll say, just to get some exposure for yourself, this is great, right? That's what Ignite's all about too, right? It's getting credits and kind of going up that mountain slowly. You can go to them if they don't have a lot of money and say, okay, let's do a step agreement. If you feel comfortable with them and you feel that they are, have a high-end product or a really good product, or their film is going to be really good. Because let's face it, not all games, not all TV shows, not all films are that good, right? Some are not very good. I've done a few that are not that great. And I've done some that are awesome films. But that's kind of a negotiating thing that you can have too. So you can actually proactively go and pitch to indie film people or indie game makers or regular game makers, AAA title game makers, the bigger ones, and say, listen, I think my song really fits well in this game or in this film that you're shooting. I can give you, I know you don't have a lot of money for a budget, but I can give you a step license agreement that we can agree on, where if it makes so much money or sells so many units, I'll get my reward then at the end of the day. So I hope that's clear. So now I'm going to talk about a few things just to watch out for. So you decided you're going to sign your track or your song or queue up to this video game company or this indie film company, or maybe you've proactively gone forward and presented your music or your song to them and said, hey, I'm going to sign a step agreement. There's a couple of things you got to be careful of. One, like I mentioned earlier, do your due diligence, which means research on the company themselves. So are they a fly-by-nighter video game company, or the film, they haven't really put a lot of money or effort into it, or the cast is not very good, or do that kind of thing. The thing you got to remember with your music is that you want to have it in reputable places, right? So for example, some composers or some artists will not, use their music for political means or things like that. So you got to do your research. Maybe it's a game that they've come to you about, and they want to use your song in the trailer, or they want to use your song in the actual body of the game. But it's a game about a topic that you're not comfortable with. Maybe it's a war, maybe it's, a shooting game, whatever it might be. Maybe you're not comfortable with that. So make sure you do your research on that side. Same thing with a film. If the subject matter is not something that fits your ideals or ideology or ethics, maybe that's not the right thing to do. So we got to do your due diligence on all of that. Second thing you got to think about is if you're going to enter into a step agreement, make sure legally it's very clear. And what I mean by that is the steps are outlined very cleanly. So if it's your game makes $10,000, I get an extra $500. If it makes $100,000, X number of dollars again, whatever it might be. That's a negotiating thing. So some steps could go up incrementally, like every time it reaches a certain level, it's $500, $500, $500. Sometimes they can have steps where it's incrementally in a different way, where it's $500. If it reaches this, then it's $10,000, all depending. So make sure you kind of negotiate that very clearly and cleanly. It's important. We're going to talk a little bit about negotiation in the coming weeks too. It's a very important factor in your music career, and a lot of artists are really scared and skeptical about how do they approach that. But it's got to be something that we're going to cover, and we're going to cover more than once probably in our Ignite lessons. And third thing to be aware of is that if you're going to do a step agreement, there's got to be something in there that talks about an auditing process. So what that means is that once they have their product out there or they have their film out there, you need to have some way where you can contact them and have the how much money they made and all the proceeds from this product, how you can have it audited to make sure that you're not getting cheated. So for example, if the game sold 100,000 copies and they're telling you that they'd only sold 50, that's a problem. So you've got to have something in that agreement where you're allowed, or your legal counsel, to audit the proceeds or how much money this product or film has made, so that you can get paid fairly. And they typically have that in those agreements. So, but that's something to really look out for, because you could be working for a company in England and you're living in the United States, and they might be getting tons of sales on their product, on their game product or their film, and all of a sudden you don't know what's going on. So you got to have that, make sure you negotiate that as well. The final thing you got to be careful of is you don't want to have a clause in the agreement that says, okay, for example, this film reaches $1 million in how much it's made, and now it's been picked up by a big distributor. Big distributor comes in and says, yeah, we'll take that film, we're going to put it on DVD, we're going to put it, HBO, whatever it might be, but we want to replace the music. So it could be your song, or maybe they're going to replace it all. You've got to be very careful of that. So you got to make sure in your agreement that it says you've got some kind of buyout option. So if it makes $1 million, or if it's picked up by a distributor, you have the right to negotiate with the distributor to keep your music in there. That's very important, because a lot of indie films become really large. There's quite a few of them that are doing really well. So you want to have that option where they just can't come in and just go, okay, we want this film, it's a great film, but we don't like that song, we don't like that song, we're pulling those out. So if you want to have that in there, you should have what's called a break fee in there. And a break fee is, okay, if you're going to take my music out of this show, it's going to cost you X number of dollars. So I hope that makes sense. That can, with things, products move. Same thing with a game. A game can be a blockbuster hit as an indie small game. If a company like EA comes on board, or Blizzard, and says, hey, we want to license that game, or we want to distribute that game, again, they could say, we like the game a lot, we think it's going to go far, but we don't like that song or that song or that song, or we're going to put all the music in it. So if that's the situation, in your contract you want to have what's called a break fee. Sorry. So something that it allows you to make money off of that if they want to break the contract. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so we talked about these step agreements, or milestone agreements, that you might hear them maybe in the game industry called that. We talked about who uses them. Again, indie filmmakers, game companies, regular filmmakers. We talked about budgets. Sometimes they're low, so they'll add that step agreement where if their product, game, or if their film moves up the ladder with regards to box office sales or purchases, you as the composer, songwriter, licensor of your music can move up the ladder and get paid as well. So that's really important to understand. We talked about some of the things to avoid, talked about break fees. We talked about making sure that you have auditing options so that you understand, or they send you their sales receipts for the launch of that game, or for the film box office receipts and tallies, so that you can get paid and fairly, right? That's what it's all about. So download the free sound pack. I hope you guys are enjoying these lessons. It's really neat to hear your stories back. One thing I will say is that if you have any news, please join our Facebook page, by the way. It's a fun little place where we can share more tips. We've got some people who got on there with some great news from our Ignite members. But if you have any news, please send us an email, craig@terrace-studios.com, or through our Facebook page, or through our Ignite contact form. But we want to spread the word about your stuff as well. This is a community we're trying to kind of, bring together. We've got people from 4 continents on it right now. I was talking to someone earlier today who's going to sign up, who's really excited about it. We're going to roll out some new things soon. But let us know your information about what's happening. Maybe you got a single that you're releasing, or an album, or a cool gig. Just let us know. We want to promote you guys, right? That's important. We're all working in this music business together, and that's what the new music business is all about. So that's it for now. Download the free samples, sound pack, use it in your music. Please keep in contact with us, and I look forward to seeing you next time.